Hello and welcome to Politically Incorrect Knitters. My name is Anne Pinkava, joined by the lovely Deplorable Knitter, and today we have a very special guest. Someone who, okay, I get excited whatever appearance he has because nobody talks better sense than our guest, Epic Mike.
Well, hi there. I don't know how to follow that. That's a really kind introduction. Um, I don't think I talk that much sense. I don't know that my family would agree, but listen, if somebody's saying it, I'm not one to argue. And I will just take the compliment as best as I can. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks for joining us. We're really excited to have you. But before we find out about Epic Mike and who he is and why we decided to have him, I just wanted to remind you guys we're sponsored by Chicken Lady Fiber Arts. And this month you can win her ornament kit. Comes with the yarns you need, comes with stuffing, all kinds of fun stuff. She's got a couple of stickers in here from our friend, the famous artist Bertie Rose, reminding you that everybody on planet Earth was born by a woman. So there you go. It's got a couple other little extra things in here. So if you guys want to enter to win this cool kit, make sure you comment on the video. It will be yours if you get picked. So there you go.
And also, if you want to check out Chicken Lady's website, it is chickenladyfiberarts.com. She has just reopened after her summer break. The promo code is Scorching20 PIK for 20% off your order. And all of her dyed to order stuff is now out. So Sweet Maple is back. I'm so excited. But you can also find all of her new colorways. She has a couple of ones that she was promoting on Instagram today, just in black and white. So check those out.
Yeah, I saw that. I was excited to see what they are. So I think they're supposed to be out today, tomorrow. So by the time this is live, you guys go check them out because there's some new stuff coming.
Really.
So cool. So let's start. Epic Mike, you
Yes.
are a staple on Geeks and Gamers, right?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so. That's where I hear about you the most. So tell our people who you are, what you do, all that fun stuff.
Oh boy. I never honestly know how to answer this question. Yeah, so that's primarily where people know me, Geeks and Gamers. I've been in their orbit for a long time. I've known Jeremy. I was actually introduced to Jeremy through my buddy Josiah Rises. He told me about this group on Facebook, and he's like, "Yeah, they're cool. They're a cool group of guys." This was back in the day when the group was heavily moderated. Jeremy wouldn't allow anybody to swear in the group.
What?
Even debates were heavily moderated. So like if it got too intense, like somebody would step in and be like, "Yo, guys, chill out" and stuff, you know. But it primarily got started because of me and Jeremy had some disagreements on some movies back in the day, like Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, and I would be like, "Hey, this guy's, you got to get in here and argue with this guy," and I would show up, and me and Jeremy we get in these huge arguments about things, all caps and everything. But I always enjoyed their group, and I remember they were like, "Hey, we're gonna start a YouTube channel," and I remember when they started that and everything, and then just over time, the general story is one day I was ranting at my wife about something, and I looked at her and I went, "I'm so sorry. I know you've heard this a million times. I need to find somebody else to rant at this about." So I hit up my buddy and I was like, "Hey, if you guys have any like spots open just for me to get on and like yell at people, that would be great." And he was like, "Yeah, you join the game." So gaming streams. So I started playing Call of Duty with those guys and got to meet the whole crew, and everything kind of just snowballed from there. And, now, jump forward. Oh, I don't know now. I think it's been like 3 or 4 years. You jump forward and, um, I'm on all kinds of streams, and I've met so many awesome people, including you guys. And then, um, the biggest thing, my biggest love and my biggest passion, I love video games and stuff. I love entertainment as in general, as a whole. I love books, I love movies, games, shows. But my primary passion is, I would say, is like writing and more screenwriting. And during 2020, me and my buddy Josiah were talking, and at the time his channel had been demonetized by YouTube. out of kind of nowhere, and that was kind of a whole story in and of itself. But we were like, hey, we should do something. Like, we both love making movies. We've talked about this for years. We've come up with all these ideas, and I mean, we have drafts and all kinds of scrapped ideas that we started out with, and we're like, why don't we just do something about this? And so we had the idea for a company called EpicVerse, which we went through a million names before we found it, and we just decided, like, the one of the consistent criticisms that people have is like, why don't you do something instead of complaining all the time? Which I think there's some legitimacy to that critique. Is like, if all you do is critique things or complain, you never do anything about it, like, what are you really building? But I think there's room for people to critique things, and there's room for people to build things, and not everybody that can talk about something or know something is necessarily capable of doing it at a high level. But I've always been really interested, so I was like, you know what? All right. So I took a screenwriting course and learned how to do screenwriting really well from a lot of industry professionals, and was like, hey, I think I can do this. They said I had a knack for it. I had a mentor who said I was pretty good at it, and I took her
Nice.
word. So yeah. So long story short, we ended up starting a studio, and we have not officially launched yet, but we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes to get things ready, because the hope is that we can launch and provide a different space for entertainment, and a different space for people in the independent sphere that aren't in the Hollywood bubble, to have a place to come and do creating and acting and writing and all that kind of stuff. But do it in a healthy sphere where they don't have to worry about being, fired for saying the wrong things, or somebody digging through all their tweets and then pulling up a tweet and saying, now you can't work anymore, things like that. Because that's one of the hard things I've noticed in the industry in general, is how many people are in the industry working today that feel like they can't talk or be themselves or be honest about what they have. Or then when you get people that are like outspoken, like somebody like Chris Pratt, who's like an outspoken Christian and all that stuff, then he's constantly under scrutiny, and people make up stories about him and stuff, because the goal is just to get rid of him, because nobody wants to be reminded of that there's a different political, religious, ideological viewpoint that can exist and also be talented and work in the
Right.
arts,
Right. That he often kind of seems to be, like he'll say something very tame, and then everyone will jump on him on it for him on it, and just kind of like,
yes.
oh wait, it's okay, it's fine. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you're fine, Chris. You're fine. Just
Yeah.
just let it be. You don't have to walk anything back.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing too. It's like, sometimes it feels like people just say things because they just want you to spend all your time walking things back instead of going forward and working on things. I remember there was like a tweet, or like a fake tweet from Chris Pratt that somebody put together and photoshopped, that was making fun of somebody, and it was like circulating all over the internet, and they're like, we got to cancel him. And somebody like went through all of his tweets, and they're like, he never said that. Like, I can't find any evidence. And they're like, okay, maybe he didn't say that specifically, but I'm sure he said something like that before. You're like, if the goal is
It's
just for
so
you to find,
ridiculous.
yeah, if the goal is just to find, like, confirmation bias about stuff, like, I don't know, what kind of sad existence is that? Now if he says something that's really defamatory or really hurtful and stuff, maybe, in his position of influence, maybe he should apologize or whatever. But I don't know, that's not for me to decide. But to want somebody to not have a career anymore because they said one thing in a tweet that you don't agree with is pretty ridiculous. I mean, if somebody held me to everything I've ever said in my life, including when I was a stupid teenager, oh my gosh, I would have been canceled a long time ago.
And including what you say on Mario Kart.
Yeah, well, and that too. Yeah, I'll have to be judged for that when I get to the pearly gates, I'm sure. Be like, listen, man, you said some really weird stuff on that live stream. So yeah, but that's the other side of it. I'm quite known for being very loud. Lot of expletives, lots of screaming, lots of rage fueled insults on Mario Kart and various other streams. But I don't know, there's definitely some of
That's
that
just
somewhere
the game,
inside,
right?
but that's the game. Yeah, it's definitely in there somewhere, because it's not, I can't fake being that angry. But yeah, in my day-to-day life, I'm definitely not like that at all. So I'm a little bit more calm and laid back. I do get fired up about stuff, but even with that, I never get to that level. So yeah.
No, you're talking about people combing through tweets and like holding them accountable. Like I am so glad I'm I think I'm technically a millennial, but like I'm on that very edge of being like Gen X, and I am so glad that I am because when I was in my stupidest phase of life, there's no record of it. There's no maybe I had a MySpace, but even that was totally not what is going on now that everybody has to deal with.
Yeah.
I just we all are dumb at some
Yeah.
point in our lives, and we all say things that we certainly regret. And
Oh yes.
if you had to be held accountable for everything you said or thought when you were like 13, I mean, that's just the most ridiculous thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I grew up. Well, MySpace showed up and Facebook showed up about the time I was in high school, and we had no idea really what was going on with that. And I don't even know if I still have I don't even know if my MySpaces are still up or not.
Is that still there?
It is still there.
It's still a site?
It is still a site. Yeah, it actually became a music site, but nobody uses it. And
That's
yeah,
hilarious.
one time I did go back, I managed to find my old MySpace, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. It wasn't necessarily anything I said, it was just so cringy and like kiddie, and I was like, I hope nobody ever finds this because this is embarrassing.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I being slightly younger, it's like that I did occasionally post on Facebook when I
Oh
was a
yeah.
teenager, and it's like, oh, don't you want to see what you said, 8 years ago? Absolutely not.
Yeah, please
10
don't
years
show me
ago,
this.
no. I never. In fact, I think I'm going to delete the whole thing.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
cringe
Oh
is.
yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I say that? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that kind of attitude is definitely wrong. I think there needs to be a lot more grace for people because everybody at some point has done or said something stupid, and it's that kind of thing. Nobody's perfect, and if the standard for what's okay or what's acceptable is perfection, then like everybody in the world should be canceled. So yeah.
The whole going back in time thing is just it just kills me because things change all the time.
Oh
Standards,
yeah.
the goalposts are always moving, so to hold people to standards that have changed is just goofy.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
anyway, sorry, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to ask a little bit about the, EpicVerse Studios, like how production is going. I have seen little pictures of that you filmed for different sorry, that you filmed for different films. From a production standpoint, you've filmed some things already. Are you waiting to edit? How do you plan on distributing this once you're done?
That's a really good question. So I always have to be careful because it's not just me in this, and so I always have to be careful how I say things because I never want to give away anything. But
Sure.
the how I say it. So when we talked about launching, the goal was to we kind of sat down, came up with some ideas, and we said, okay, what are some really good ideas that we can do? Because what we kind of took a page out of Ripa's book, Eric July's book, in that he had a book ready to go,
Right.
and he said, hey, we're gonna do a launch. We're gonna do like a it's not really a crowdfunder because he doesn't need the funding here, and he has the product. And so we wanted to do something similar, but the problem with visual mediums and stuff in movies is that they're very expensive. They can be very expensive, and they're very
Sure.
time consuming, and there are a lot of moving parts. Whereas if you get together, I mean, it's not that Eric didn't have a lot of moving parts either, but there's a lot more control you can have of writing something, and then you need to get penciled and inked and stuff like that. Whereas sometimes we have to go back and reshoot something, and that requires flying actors in, or getting an actor back to do things. So we said, hey, let's come up with a group of ideas, and we're going to take those ideas, we're going to put those to film with virtually no budget, just on the skin of our teeth, and like whatever we can do as filmmakers. And so we got some equipment together, and we just started shooting things, and we had like I can't say how many, but I will say that we had a section of scripts that we had in the works of projects. I will say the main projects that me and Josiah have worked on together are all short films, because when we sat down and talked about doing a feature length film, it's there's just too much work that goes into it and it takes too long. Whereas right now, shorter form content is actually kind of the trend. And so it'll be easier to give people kind of a bite-sized look at what we can do than trying to give everybody one big thing that maybe fits a specific genre. Maybe that's not everybody's genre and stuff. So we kind of tried to run the gamut of different genres, different styles and ideas of storytelling and filmmaking. As well as finding some other people that were independent circuit that were like, hey, I'm doing things. We had one of our shorts is a very short animated piece by a young woman that was just out of art school, and we were looking for an animator, and she said, I would love to do something with you guys. So we gave her the script, and she said, I'm going to draw some concept designs. And it was really cool because she came up with a concept design and she showed me one of the characters, and I had vaguely described the character in the script, and it was exactly what I wanted. And one of the cool things about it is the character in my head had purple eyes, and she drew a character with purple eyes, and that wasn't even in the script. And I was like, hey, so you just like nailed something that I didn't even tell you was a thing. And she was like, oh my gosh, and that kind of stuff is always really cool, because it almost, when you feel like you're locked in with a group like that, it's really cool to be able to make stuff, because sometimes there's subtleties and things that you don't think of that shine through in your art that you never expected to shine through, or you didn't expect to come to fruition and stuff. So that's part of it. But yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, right now we have 6 main pieces of work that we're working on, and as well as, and I won't disclose how many other things we have going on. We have some other people working on other projects as well that will be a surprise to people, because we haven't officially announced those, and probably won't announce those until we're ready to launch. If you go to the website epicverse.tv, you can see we have like a list of coming soon projects, and at the beginning it was all coming soon, and everybody's like, are they ever going to update that? Are they even doing anything right now? They've and I'm like, yes, we're working on things. And they're like, where though? So we put together some like posters and stuff. And as you know, one of the things that we wanted to do too is, in the day and age that we're in, there's not really like stars and movie stars and stuff like that are kind of like they're like the old guard. There's very few of them left. Like Tom Cruise is probably one of the last real movie stars in the world, So one of the things that we talked about that was unique is that internet stars, internet personalities and things like that have a lot of star power, because they may be just specific to their communities, but it's always cool to see somebody stretch their wings and try something new. So if I take Ryan Kittle from Geeks and Gamers and we put him into a film, that means that his audience gets to see him do something that they've never seen him do before. And that's an exciting thing for them, So we kind of talked about that, and we had some ideas for different people. And I won't say whether or not, a lot of people have speculated what the meaning of these posters are, whether we try to make Ryan an action star, or Drunk 3PO an action star, or anything. I won't say exactly what their role is in these things, but we tried to do something that we thought would be a fun idea that the audience could enjoy and weren't what everybody was expecting. So yeah, right now we have 1 project fully complete. We have 2 that are in the editing phase right now. Well, actually we have 2 projects that are fully complete, and we have 2 projects that are in the editing phase. And then we are finishing the shooting on 2 of them. And then one of them is to be shot, but is like in like mid pre-production. So, and those are all projects that me and Josiah specifically are working on, producing, directing, writing, all that stuff. Whereas some of the other projects, we may have like written it, but somebody else is directing it or things like that. So, but the hope was, to give people something to look at, so that what we're not doing is going, hey, we like making movies. Would you like to give us some money so we can make movies? Because that's easy to say, but it's hard to prove. Or somebody goes, okay, yeah, we'll give you all this money, and then they don't know what they're doing, or they get in over their heads, or they weren't really ready for that. And so then the product is, lackluster, or the product isn't what people were expecting, because they're like, we gave you X amount of dollars to do this, and this is all you could do. So we were like, let's give people something and show people something with what we have available to us, so that way they feel like when we launch and we launch things and people want to support us and provide us resources in whatever way they do, they feel like it's in good hands and they feel like we're actually
Right.
trying to provide something positive and quality for them instead of just trying to take their money and run, because that happens enough times, and I've seen enough people get burned through Kickstarters and
Yeah.
promises of things that it just sucks, and you never want to see people disappointed like that. So yeah, that was my long-winded answer. I know I can talk and ramble a lot, so I appreciate
No,
you giving me the floor
it's
there.
it's actually really interesting because I have no idea how somebody would go about doing what you do. And so hearing you kind of talk about, so you have stuff in pre-production. Great. I assume that means you're like getting it ready to shoot. I have no idea. So it's kind
Yeah.
of cool to hear you talk about it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
do you have like certain genres that you guys are working with, or is it just whatever strikes your fancy? Like how are you said you write it. Do you write all different kinds of things, or you
Yeah. So yes, me and Josiah tend to lean towards like sci-fi, fantasy. I'm a huge superhero buff. I will say this before anybody gets excited about it. We're not working on any superhero stuff. Not yet.
See, I was just really excited for the Ryan Kindle romantic comedy. I thought that
Yes.
would be great.
Yeah. Well,
So,
yeah. Yeah. It could be. I won't say that whether it is or not, but
okay.
um
I just saw the pictures of him at Universal looking like he's having the worst time ever, where everyone around
yeah.
him is giggling.
Yeah,
So
everybody's laughing and smiling. He's like, I don't want to be here.
he's just
Yeah.
like,
That's the face that Ryan makes all the time. No, I love Ryan. And that's the other cool thing is I got to meet people. It brought people together that I wouldn't have ever expected to meet. Like the first time we met Drunk 3PO, he was a champ because we were shooting outside and it was like -3 degrees, and he's from Florida, so he's not used to this. And so we had like vehicles. We were shooting in this like smaller area, and we just had cars running off to the side, and we had them like wrapped in a blanket, and we would have them pull the blanket off, shoot something really quickly, wrap them back up in a blanket, and we stick him in one of the cars with the heat running so that he could warm up. Because it was just like,
like one of
yeah.
those food service hot boxes, but for
Oh
him.
yes, yep. And we had like thermoses of just hot stuff just to keep people, because it was cold, and he was a champ about it. But that's the fun part, is like you never know what kind of a scenario you'll run into when you start doing something. Shooting outside is totally different than shooting in the inside where you control all the elements and stuff. We've learned a lot about filmmaking over this time. And so yeah, that part's always really fun. But yeah, I write. I can write pretty much anything. I like drama. I like sci-fi. I like mysteries, things like that. I will say the two genres that I'm probably the most terrified to write are comedy and mystery, because to me, comedy, if you do it poorly, it's just the worst. And mystery, if it's not mysterious, is just the worst. You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
if you guess all of your plot beats like 5 minutes before it happens, you're like, that wasn't that
yeah.
great.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
What? Or like the big conclusion is like it was the butler with the candlestick in the dining room, and you're like, great. Wow, what an exciting conclusion to this whole story. So, those are things that, like, as a writer, it'll be something I challenge myself with. But we did bring on other writers, some new people, some more, experienced people that we hope in the future will be able to do some more varied projects. But most of the stuff that we're doing right now leans more into like the dramatic, maybe slightly actiony sci-fi realm, maybe a little fantasy in there as well. Me and Josiah are both huge fans of Lord of the Rings, things
Right.
like that. So we're always, drawing inspiration from things that we've liked before and things that we've seen before. But yeah, I would say that's the general idea, but they're all kind of different. And to an extent, I will say the idea behind all the projects was kind of like to give like a little bit of maybe an Aesop's fable kind of feel, where like there's definitely a theme to the story, and we're not going to tell the audience what the theme is because that kind of defeats the purpose of interpretation. But at least people can watch it and kind of come to their own conclusions and have a feeling about what they think about it. Even if it's not their cup of tea, that they can actually look at it and go, yeah, but like, I get what they're trying to go for, you know? Because to me, that's the best part of art is when you can watch something that maybe isn't in your wheelhouse and still can appreciate it. You know, I'm not a huge romantic comedy sort of person, but there's some rom-coms that I absolutely love. So, you know, like I can appreciate pretty much anything if it's of quality. So,
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
No,
That's a great
that's
question.
interesting.
Yeah.
And you're like, one of my favorite things to read is like mysteries. And
Yeah.
you're right. If it's written well, they're fantastic.
Yes.
I'm always surprised. If I can guess it, I know that it's not written well. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a hard, and I'm always amazed when people can make a story come together at the end. So I give you props for being able to write anything,
I
because
appreciate that. Yeah.
that's not an easy task, for real.
No, it's not. And I realize that, and so I do realize like not everybody can do it. And it's one of those things like you never want to be pretentious about it because like some people get very in their heads are like I'm a writer and I'm so creative, and I'm like, well, you're keeping people entertained, you make people laugh or cry or whatever, and that's cool. It's an important part of our culture because stories have always been an important part of the human experience. But yeah, like if it was easy, anybody could just do it. Anybody could like, and that's one of the things that's actually kind of funny because you run into that a lot when you start working on things. Like I can't tell you how many times people come to me and go, I have a movie idea. And I'm like, okay. And like they're close friends and stuff. So you're never trying, it's never like mean or whatever, but they like tell you it and you're like, that wouldn't work. And they're like, oh, okay, you know, or, oh, wow, that's really cool. But like, you know, it's like a guy stands at a grocery store for 6 hours. And I'm like, okay, what's the point? And they're like, it's just kind of interesting, right? And I'm like, yeah.
Like I've stood at a grocery store for 6 hours, and
Yeah.
let me tell you,
Yeah, I would
sense.
never make a movie about that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's one of those things. But yes, like mystery is one of those things. I'm a big fan of Agatha Christie. I think she's amazing.
Yeah.
Which, you know, kind of flies in the face of I guess the current attitude that women don't get the opportunity to do anything. But I'm like, one of the most prolific mystery writers of all time is a woman, you know.
Definitely.
As I've gotten older, I've also I've learned to appreciate Jane Austen. Shout out to my wife for that. Because
See?
yeah. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I'm a big Jane Austen fan, but it's like no, and when there's a lot of people like, oh, it's just going to tea parties at other people's house. Like it is so much more subtle than that, but
Oh
okay,
yeah.
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
there's a lot to it.
yeah, well
Yeah.
that's what I thought. I remember I took a creative writing class in high school and my teacher was a huge Jane Austen fan. Oh, she loved all of her work. And she tried to get us to watch, oh my gosh, I don't remember which book it was that she tried to get us to watch, and I was like, I am not interested in this. Like, why are you making me watch this? This is dumb. And then I got married. My wife is in love with the BBC version of Pride and Prejudice. And so
Of
one day I was
course.
like,
Who isn't?
yeah, well, I was like, all right,
I
I
mean,
will
for
sit down
real.
and watch this with you because I can appreciate, like, I grew up, one of my favorite shows growing up was called Horatio Hornblower, and it was
Oh
on the
yeah.
BBC. Yeah, I
Yeah.
loved that growing up. I loved that show. I was like, all right, I'll give it a chance. And we're in like episode 3, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is pretty good. And then like, you know, I like listening to like the intrigue and like when Lizzie's reading like the letter that her dad gives her and he's just like pacing back and forth. I'm like, what's happening? You know, and then like by the end I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy and stuff. Like I'm like, I love this. This is amazing. So, you know, I learned I learned to appreciate the fact that it may not necessarily be for me in that moment, but it's masterfully done. It's one of those things, you know. Same with Harry Potter. I grew up never watching Harry Potter. I was like, no, I'll never watch this ever. And then I was like, Harry Potter's lame. I'm never reading the books. Yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh boy, yeah. I was like, I'm
Oh
never
no.
watching this. And like 2 years ago, I was like, you know what? I will sit down and watch these because my wife had watched them, and I'm like, we'll see if they're really as good as I thought. And like the first 2 movies, I was like, okay, all right, we'll keep going. And then the third movie, I was like, I'm in love with this franchise. I get it.
Right.
Like I love
No,
this.
and okay, so I grew up reading Harry Potter. Like I'd read the whole thing over again every time
Oh
a new
yeah.
one came out. I was that kid.
Yes, I did it
But
too.
also
But I
I
was an
even
adult doing it.
right. Well, no, but I even find with Harry Potter that if I'm rereading them, I'm like, no, the third book is where the political intrigue starts. When there's like, okay, first two books, you're like, okay, there's monsters, okay, there's darkness in this world. Here's the school, here's the kid. Third book, you're like, hey, there's like a wider political system going on. And let me tell you, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It
Oh yeah.
expands from there.
Yeah. I was blown away. I was like, wow. And by the end I was like, this is a masterclass like in storytelling. Like she may have not had everything figured out, but she really pulled it together in the end because boy oh boy, it felt like she had everything figured out, you know? Yeah. So
No.
I learned to appreciate that stuff. But it actually I'm really thankful for that because I think, you know, if your attitude is like I just pick one genre and that's my thing, cool. But I also think as a writer, some of the best things you can do is expand your outlook on writing and creativity into other genres, even if it's not something that you necessarily like, because you can find different ways of telling stories that are like unexpected, you know? I love the idea of taking, you know, if you wrote something similar to Pride and Prejudice, but put it in the backdrop of like Star Wars, you know? Sometimes there's like those
Or
kind of things. Go ahead.
no, sorry, something. Okay, sorry, I'm evangelical about this
No,
guy.
you're good.
But okay, so Natsumi Soseki he wrote books around early 1900s.
Okay.
Okay, Japan just opened up to the rest of the world. He
Yeah.
was absolutely fascinated with Jane Austen, and he was a English literature professor. So
Wow.
his books, he is one of the premier modern classics of Japanese writer. His books are very funny, they're very subtle, but they're you can tell the influence of Jane Austen because they're very quiet, they're very social commentary, but it's all Meijing Japan. Like
Oh,
they're
that's
not
awesome.
romances, they're completely different. Some of them are kind of have dark undertones, but otherwise it's just regular workaday stories, but it has that same angle. But mentally coming to it from a totally different perspective, the
Yeah.
Japanese way of thinking is so much different than the English way of thinking that it's interesting when you get the two cultures collide and they sort of bat back and forth their ideas of
Yeah.
what literature is.
That's
And
awesome.
anyways, it's it's really fascinating to read stuff like that, how they kind
Yeah.
of borrow from each other's cultures and
Absolutely.
produce these
Yeah.
works.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. It's just it could be so unexpected and it's so like even like you said like you know over here in like America and stuff, we can have a very specific bent on what we think good storytelling, good writing, all that stuff, and somebody from Japan or even somebody from France or you know somebody from these other countries can have a totally different way of perspective. And yeah, so you just never know. You never know what you'll stumble into in the creative sphere if you give yourself room to experience different things. And I always can appreciate when something like that kind of catches you off guard. Yeah. Yeah. That's my other rant. Thank you. Thank you for coming to my TED talk. Yeah. Yeah.
Copies could be acquired by mail.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I have a question for you guys because I am very curious. Um,
Okay.
you guys' name obviously. When I mentioned to somebody I was going to be on this, they giggled and snorted because they're like, "What did you just say?" I was like, "Knitters." But so my mom grew up. She was really into crafts. I remember watching her. She had sewing machines and knitting and all kinds of stuff. She did all kinds of stuff, and I was always like, as a kid, I was like, "Oh, that's mom's thing," you know. But as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate the work of sitting down and putting something together with your hands and stuff. I would just like to hear, like, how did you guys get into this? Like, where did this come from, and what got you to the place where now you have a show where you guys are like knitting and talking about it? And I don't know, I just love to hear you guys' story.
You want to go first, Sam?
No, you please do.
Okay. Well, I started designing. I've been knitting on and off forever. I got
Okay.
into it again when I had my first kid in 2013. So I've been doing it for
Okay.
like 10 years pretty solid. But the midterms, the 2018 midterms
Mhm.
is when I did my first design. I did a walkaway hat, you know, like
Okay.
Brandon Strock, his walkaway thing. Somebody
Yeah.
wanted it. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I uploaded it to this very popular knitting site. And it happens to be a very liberal knitting site. And so everybody hated it, except for like a few people. And I got this huge backlash. And so then I decided to keep doing stuff. So I was making patterns that said things like Trump 2020. And I got called a racist.
Sorry, I was just saying, which I always say, I'm always surprised that nobody else until this point, I mean, maybe somebody did personally, but nobody else put out Trump patterns. Half the country voted for the man, and no one was like, hey, I want to make my own Trump campaign hat. No one. Absolute silence.
Wow.
Yeah. But then I started causing trouble because I made a hat that said build the wall. Had like a brick motif and it said build the wall. And then I was called a racist bigot. And then I kept designing, and I more or less what happened is that I angered the powers that be enough on the website that they kicked me off. And then I was kicked off on a Friday, and then the Sunday after I was kicked off, they came out with a statement that said that if you support Trump, you cannot be on their site because it is unequivocally support for white supremacy. And so
yeah, that was Ravelry
turned into a
in
thing.
June
It
of
wasn't on purpose.
2019. Yeah, that was pretty shocking for a lot of people, myself included.
Wow. Well, first of all, I love that this started with somebody being like, "Hey, can you do this?" And it's kind of sounds like you're like, "Oh, you're a little bit of a rebel." You were like, "Hey, I kind of like that. Okay,
Right.
I think I'm gonna keep making this." Like, I don't know. I love that. Yeah.
And I picked the name Deplorable Knitter because I knew I was going to get backlash, because anything to do with Trump you get backlash. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to put it out under my name. I'm just going to kind of be anonymous about it. And yeah, and then it just kind of like people lost their freaking minds, and it turned into like this thing. And yeah.
That's crazy. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, I started designing on accident because somebody said, "Oh, hey, can you do this?" And I was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And now it's something I do, and I'm like, "Okay, well, here I am." Cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Anne was a little less. Anne's a little bit quieter. She made her debut a little bit quieter.
Okay.
Yes. Well, so I started knitting when I was a teenager, and actually the first thing that really got me from just, plain, knit purls, not following any sort of pattern, but moved me to actual pattern making was there was a pair of wrist warmers from Doctor Who that I really wanted to make, and somebody had a pattern for them, and I had to like learn how to knit in the round and do cables and stuff. But I wanted those wrist warmers. I wanted the Rose Tyler wrist warmers so badly.
That's awesome.
So that kind of moved me over. And then at that point, I was such a prolific knitter that I basically had to like, okay, I need to sell these. I don't know how to sell these. So I would do nerd hats. Like I would do, I'd do Loki and Winter Soldier were the most popular for years. Just knit piles of those. But I'd do some Captain America. I made some Black Panther ones. They didn't sell. Just saying. But I spent a lot of time on that pattern though. Wait, I got one. See,
oh, that's awesome.
Nobody wants this hat.
Yeah, but I love that though. That's actually really cool looking. Yeah.
Here, you can have it. Like I said, nobody wants this hat. But no, that's what I would make patterns like that. And so the Ravelry thing happened. I was torqued, and I was on Instagram a lot, which is where a lot of the news of this was going on. So I of course knew about the lovely Deplorable Knitter, and I was just following anybody who would say anything against this Ravelry thing, because most of the knitters on Instagram were saying that I stand with Ravelry. I say this and that. So I was following this all pretty closely.
Ravelry was the site that called us white supremacists, just so you know.
Right.
Gotcha.
So
yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So all of that happened, and also at about the same time, it was when Colin Kaepernick,
Oh yeah.
he said that he wouldn't wear Betsy Ross Nikes because Betsy Ross was evil, and I'm like, she was an abolitionist. What's your deal?
Yeah.
That she's racist, whatever. So I made my first pattern, which is a Betsy Ross beanie.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So
That's rad.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
that had a bit of yeah, so that had a bit of traction. Everyone was excited about it. And yeah, so I because of that, there was some fuss on Instagram about it because everyone was excited for this pattern. I had never written a pattern before. So because of that, DK reached out to me because somebody wanted to, so craftivism quote is quite a thing in the liberal world.
Activism. That's
So
amazing. Wow.
I know. And there's all of these like art displays of, this is me screen printing this evil thing, just lots of stupid stuff. Just assume that it's
Yeah.
stupid. But here's a crocheted blanket of the American flag, and every like couple of days the artist will come back and unravel sections of it with the Constitution behind because we're so under attack under Trump. Stuff like that is
Wow. Yeah.
yarn bomb, nicer things with quote yarn bombing when they'll like cover light poles and granny squares and stuff. So stuff like that. But lots of pro-abortion stuff, lots of F
Hmm.
Trump stuff, pro-Hillary. Everyone knows about the pink cat-eared hats. That was a huge thing for craftivism.
Hmm.
So all that happened. So this gal reached out to DK because she wanted to do a crafting conservatism exhibit, that she was kind of willing to reach out to the other side because most conservatives, if they knit for a cause, they're like, making clothes for children
Hmm.
or the homeless or
Yeah, it's less about making works of art, and it's more like, oh, the pregnancy center down the road needs blankets. I'm going to whip some up and send them down. That
Gotcha.
tends to be the conservative viewpoint when it comes to this. Anne
Hmm.
and I are kind of outliers making anything even political. Um,
Gotcha.
there's
Yeah.
some people that do, but yeah, for the most part, if you come across conservative crafters, they're doing things that are actually useful to people.
I
So
gotcha.
right. Yeah, so there's a little less resist in conservative circles.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, so she reached out to me as someone who might be interested in joining this crafting conservatives thing, and we were going to work on a quilt together, making bad boys like these. So the quilt never happened. I still have bits of it, and the
and I
COVID
never did
happened.
any of mine.
Yeah. And COVID happened, the exhibit was canceled, all of that. But we really enjoyed talking to each other. So we started a podcast.
That's
Yeah, because
awesome.
that's what you do. I live in New York. She lives in South Dakota. We did our podcast for almost 3 years before we even met in person.
Wow.
So
That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, but it's fun. It's cool.
Yeah.
But the thing that we found when we got together and we started doing this is like I would get a ton of stuff on my Instagram, like people like, I'm so glad you're talking. I'm so glad you're saying these things because I feel like I'm all alone.
Hmm.
And then we started our podcast and people are like, I'm so glad that you're talking like common sense, normal. It's not this crazy, you know, there's a whole bunch on the other side that like want to burn it all down and
Yeah.
if you don't agree with them, they want your business to go out under and you know.
Yeah. And I feel that that's something that's common with sort of the nerd side too, that there's all of these, groups of people, commentators, even more in the yarn world too, but more in the geek world where they'll run news articles about Comicsgate or whatever, or
Yeah.
they'll say why we need to stop doing whatever as a video game trope,
Hmm.
and that the sort of mainstream of all of even the niche subjects is all very liberal, and it surprises people when there's any sort of a conservative or even conservative-ish
Hmm.
representation pushing back against that. They're like, oh, I thought I was the only one. It's like, no, you're not. Just
Yeah. Yeah,
Hang in
no.
there. We're
Yeah,
coming.
you got it. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, about like the nerd culture and like video games. And it's funny because even movies and video games have different things because one of the things about video games, like, I'm like, I guess you can call video game culture conservative. It's not really, it's just super toxic. But it's like, I don't know. It's toxic in a different way because there's like I won't get into all of it, but there's a whole thing about where the toxic gaming came from. And this was it was a buzz term that this guy invented to kind of like categorize gamers and stuff. But for the most part, like, you understood if you like jump into a Call of Duty lobby, regardless of whether it's acceptable or not, it is a battleground. There are insults and slurs and terms and your mama
You're
jokes and
gonna learn
everything.
some words.
Yeah, you're going to learn some new words. You're going to hear a string of expletives you never thought somebody could string together. Sometimes you
Yeah.
learn new terms that you never even knew were terms, and you go, I got to go look
Oh.
that up. And you're like, oh my God,
Dude,
where did you learn that?
I know,
am
that's on my
so
computer now.
glad.
Yeah.
I am so glad that you're saying this because every night at 8 o'clock, my husband plays Gears of War, and
Yeah.
sometimes the things that man says, I am like, "Why did I marry you?
Yeah, you're like,
You sound
who are you?
unhinged."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, and I just saw a thing today that Xbox are now going full commie, saying that they're
Oh, good.
monitoring what you're saying, and it's 8 strikes and you're out. So it's like, so all
Oh,
the
he's in
comments were,
trouble.
use your 7 gamer words wisely, people.
Yeah, I have to have my mic muted. I don't talk to people in games anymore unless I'm talking to my buddies. Like, yeah, but it was weird because what it is you have people in these positions that have like somehow, I don't know how they got these jobs. I don't know where they got these jobs, but they're game journalists and game developers and things like that all got into these positions. And it was like, if you really think about it, there might be 100 of these people who are making decisions for millions of people and saying, well, we need more representation in gaming for women, because women are, the statistics that women make up, what is it, like 60% of gaming or something, even though like 90% of that 60% play Farmville or Candy Crush, they don't
I was
talk
just gonna
about
say
those
it's
numbers.
me on Stardew Valley.
Yeah,
like making my little farm.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like, but the conversation is like, should somebody playing Stardew Valley be able to dictate how somebody conducts themselves on Call of Duty? No. But in the same way, somebody in Call of Duty shouldn't be able to conduct what somebody does on Stardew Valley, because somebody in Call of Duty might go, why is there no action in this game? There needs to be more, imagine like somebody in Call of Duty producing an update for Stardew Valley, and you go, this is not the game I wanted to play.
First-person shooter Stardew Valley.
Yeah,
It'd be hilarious.
you're going on just mowing down the neighborhood and stuff. You're like, I don't want that, and that's the problem, is like there's like such a loss of nuance or subtlety to people's experience that, like, you know what, if people want to be crazy and scream at each other and be ridiculous and stupid and competitive on this video game, then let them do it. And if you don't like it, maybe just build in tools so that it's easy to say, I don't want to play with these people anymore. Then you'll never be matched with those people anymore. You can move on to your thing or whatever. But like, yeah, you don't hear people complaining about Stardew Valley. You don't hear people complaining about that. You watch The Sims do more and more sim things and stuff. And
yeah,
it's funny because a lot of times these corporations are the ones making those decisions, but nobody seems to really get collectively angry enough at them for how predatory their monetary practices is. The fact that like there's like, what is it? I think it's like $6,000 or something at one point to like buy all the packages to The Sims or something crazy. It was like a lot of money.
Yeah, and there's new ones every day, and even okay, I am a Sims player. Hi.
Yeah.
Even at half price, I'm like, that is a bit much, though. I don't want to pay that much. And then it's also the thing where I have no physical copy. I am a physical copy girl, but I get Sims and other games through my Steam account.
Yeah.
And then what happens one day when that disappears, or if some glitch comes through and
Yeah.
kills the entire thing? And how many, hundreds of dollars, may people lose with that?
Yeah.
And what if one day Steam says, "Oh, I don't like you anymore. There goes everything." And that's not
Yeah.
just, all your money, but all your hours put into it.
Yeah.
And it's all of that. It's like, well, they haven't done it yet.
Yeah. Well, no, that's
But
never going to happen, but it's like we're watching it happen.
well,
Yeah.
and I mean, Apple does that with music, where you buy songs and suddenly there's your songs are not available. They're doing it with books that
Hmm.
you can see, like, oh wait, this is no longer a thing. The whole thing with Roald Dahl, and that they're changing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Well, if your Kindle updated, or if you got a new copy of that, it's automatically changed to
Yeah.
the quote, for modern audiences version.
Yeah.
And that can just, auto update without you even knowing about it. It's a terrifying thing.
Yeah. 100%. A term I use a lot is revisionist history. Because instead of people looking at the past and going, wow, that was terrible, let's not do that anymore. It's like, well, I don't even want to look at the terrible things of the past. So let's go back and make the world in the vision that we've always wanted it to be. So you go back and you take a book like Tom Sawyer, or well, not Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, and you like cut out all the parts about his slave friend and stuff, thinking that you're being kind and understanding because people don't want to read about that. But actually, what you're doing is you're erasing history about a character and about a book that, if it's problematic, don't read it. But like trying to change it or remove it so that you can make it more palatable for modern audiences, well, that's the other thing too. Who are these modern audiences that are crying for this? A lot of times they're not. Well, most people are so casually involved in things in general that they're just going, why do I care whether or not they change Roald Dahl's books? I don't, because they don't understand the implications of it, because they're too busy with other things going on. Which it's not a critique of them. It's not a critique of the people that are upset about it. It's just everybody has different things that mean different things to them. Because if somebody doesn't care what happens to Roald Dahl's books, they might care if one day they find out that they are not allowed to change their engine parts in their car anymore because they, the engine, they don't want people tampering with engines, so your car doesn't belong to you anymore. Like, or what
No,
happens.
I just saw
Yeah.
one with printers that's like, oh, well, you didn't update and you weren't connected in with Wi-Fi, so, or you weren't connected into your account. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we shut your printer is inoperable now. You're like, it's my
Yeah.
printer. It's physically here. It's like, well, it was connected to Wi-Fi, so
Yep. Yeah, we
bummer.
can't run it now. Yeah. It's crazy. Or, the whole thing, what was it? There was a car, yeah, this car thing where you had to pay they wanted to pay like a monthly package for like heated seats. They're like, but they're already in the
Oh,
car. They're like, yeah, but like we want to, figure out how to monetize it and stuff. I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that if you push back on it would make a difference. But I think sometimes they know that like most people don't care enough or don't know enough or aren't informed enough
mhm.
because they're too busy to be informed about it, or they don't
Well,
have the time or yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, but that's a thing that's happened a lot in the knitting thing, because I know that a lot of the people who are very outspoken liberals get the like, can't we just stick to knitting? And Anna and I also get those comments about like, can't we just stick to knitting? And it's, yeah, I want it to be my hobby and stuff, and I do a lot of it that's not political, but also other people made it political. So I could sit here and not say anything, or I
Hmm.
can speak the truth because somebody needs to,
Yes.
or at
Or
least my
the
version of the
the amount
truth.
of people will say, oh, don't be political. It's like, well, in the year 2020, you started out your not political knitting podcast by saying that you support Black Lives Matter. Like that
Yes.
Right.
was being political. They're like, oh no, that's not political. That's just what decent people do. I'm like, have you read the website
Yeah.
that you have those different issues going on?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I find, kind of a little back to the censorship issue, that it's like, oh, well, again, the stupid update for modern audience things drives me up the wall. But it's
Yeah.
like, okay, me as, someone who has read older books, but also picked up the James Bond books, I'm like, oh, these are incredible. Ooh, that's a little racy, James.
Yeah.
But how am I? Okay, but even me, you know, who it's like, no, that is what somebody of that time was thinking.
Yeah.
That is the attitudes portrayed. That is what people were saying. That is, It's like you can argue back and forth whether or not it was a accurate portrayal of the time. But like you said, if you take that away, it's the sort of historical mentality of I'm brilliant, everyone in the past was stupid and evil.
Yes.
But then
Yes.
but while you still say that everyone in the past was stupid and evil, you sort of wash like everybody is horrible, but we're going to portray them in our modern insipid way at the same
Yes.
time.
Yep.
Like kind of with the Jane Austen thing, but historical dramas
Yeah.
and every historical drama that comes along does the stupid thing about the corsets. That in the past, don't you know, women were horribly oppressed with these corsets and they just couldn't move. And it was all because of the evils of men. And I want to rip my hair out every single time.
Yeah.
That it's like, no, just like it's like they have to talk about it as a feminist touch point. I'm like, y'all are just no, that's just not how it be.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, you're good. I mean, because you're right. That's exactly it. A narrative or an attitude will get started, and even if it's not correct, people will push that attitude and be like, "No, that's definitely what it was," or whatever. And then so that becomes like a talking point, and people don't even realize what they're saying. Like people don't, like when you go back into the past, even like the suffragette movement, to find out that there was like women that are like, I don't want to vote because I don't want to get drafted into the war. I like being at home and I like taking care of my family and spending time with my friends and like doing social things. I don't want to have to go to work. And they were like, shut up. We need this. Like you don't know what you need and stuff. But nowadays it would seem ridiculous to ever think that somebody wouldn't want to do that. Not because there aren't people that don't want to do that. It's just the attitude becomes, well, anybody that wants that is obviously oppressed. I'm like, no,
it's internalized misogyny now. For me, I'm a
yes,
stay-at-home mom. I homeschool my kids.
yeah,
I
you
I
terrible
take care of
person.
my home.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
I do that because I have internalized misogyny, not
Yeah,
because I want to be a good partner to my husband and I want to raise my kids.
you
You
obviously
know.
hate yourself. Yeah, it's a really
Yes,
sad state of
absolutely.
affairs. Yeah, I hate myself so much. I get to stay home and not have to drive every day to work and be miserable at work. I know it's no,
I get to
yeah,
see my kids every day. I mean, I think because I'm with them all the time, I do complain about them more than like maybe parents whose kids do go to school.
yeah.
But I think that that's normal because
That's a
when you're
trade
with
off.
somebody all the time, it's life.
Yeah,
But
yeah. And I love kids. I love my kids, but they're annoying. Like
yeah,
kids are
after a while,
annoying.
you're like, please find something to do.
Yeah, they're like, I'm
So
bored. And I'm like, it's not my job to keep you entertained. Please go find something. And they're like, what am I supposed to do? It's outside just has trees and grass. There's nothing out there. And I'm like,
oh my
yeah, that's all
gosh.
I had when I was growing up too, buddy. Like,
That's what my
yeah.
kids are like. And then I'll be like, well, go read a book. And they'll be like, I don't want to. And I'll be like, you're not playing a
I've
video game. That's what they want to do. And I'm like, no,
yes.
find
Like, I
find
already
something
read
to
a
do.
book today. I'm like, read another
Too
book.
bad.
Yeah.
It's good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. But that's exactly it. Like the attitude that somebody might want to do that becomes about like a feminist talking point instead of actually asking people, what do you want? Or what, or giving people an opportunity to decide what they want for themselves. And if the general consensus becomes, yes, this is something we want, then that could be it's something that's implemented. But that's not what's happening. What it is people are making decisions for minorities and small groups of people that are just very vocal about what they want. It's like you watch across every IP that we know right now that they're all falling under this thing of like we need modern representation or modern audiences. You look at something like Star Trek, which like yes, the original series like sometimes is dated in how it portrays things, but not really. It was pretty ahead of its time even by today's standards,
See,
and
I love the original series so
yeah.
much. Like,
She wants
people
me to
give
use it to teach my kids school. She thinks that anything they need to learn, I can teach them with old Star
See,
Trek.
I think
Hey,
Star Trek is very essential. It teaches you, group dynamics,
yep,
working as a team. It teaches you imagination for when horrible things happen in this world. How are you going to respond to that? What is
yeah,
the moral way moving forward?
yeah.
And William Shatner rips his shirt a lot, which I think is
He
really
did.
important
That
for
is very
everybody.
important.
No,
Yeah.
but Also, he gives lots of great speeches for truth and justice,
Yeah,
and again, how to articulate these ideals even in unfamiliar scenarios, which there's of all of the stupid, like almost to cosmic horror level of stuff that is coming in the news. Well, even with the thing you just said about having to pay for heated seats,
yeah,
only if somebody could have thought how this could go horribly wrong.
yeah. Nope.
That you need that little bit of, unknown imagination of, okay, well, what if the giant space wedgie comes one day and now we have to figure out all of our wars through computers only? And
Yeah.
how is that going to play out? You have to kind of go through the imaginative levels
Yes.
of that. So,
Yep.
anyways, I think that's important. Anyways, sorry,
Uh-huh.
Star Trek.
No, you're good.
Or
They don't want you thinking for yourself, Anne. If you have the ability to look at a problem, reason it through, and think about, like, is this a good solution or not? That's not what they want. There's a
Yeah.
reason that all the curriculum is the same and they all are,
Yeah.
you know, there's a meme, and I'm sure you guys have seen it. It's Austin Powers, and it says something like, I want to learn how to do my taxes, and it's him going, some men get periods, and like that's
Yeah.
what it is. That's what our world
Yeah.
is boiling down to, just nonsense. So anyway,
Well,
sorry.
no, you're good. It's about the emotional, whatever emotional, the bleeding heart emotional appeal of something is, instead of what is the practical application of this in life. Because if you can teach somebody all the practical applications, and then you want to have a conversation about who can have periods and who can't, okay. But the thing is, if you teach people that stuff, they'll find out that some of that doesn't really matter, and it's not as important because it's an individual concept that works for the individual. I have very close friends, that very, very close friends that I love dearly, that are trans. I use their pronouns and I have no qualms about it. I don't think about it. It's not something they ever compelled me to do. It was something that, because I care about them, I use because I respect them. I have
Right.
friends that are gay and lesbian and all that. And guess what? I don't like walk in their house and go, I love them. I love their partners and what they have going on in their lives and stuff. But here's the thing: if a random person on the street ran up to me and I said, "How are you doing today, sir?" and they screamed at me that wasn't their correct pronouns, I don't have any reason to respect that person. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I can still care about your well-being. I'm not going to push you into traffic because you're a stranger. But the thing is, I have no reason to look at you and have that level of respect and desire for you like I do for my friends, because I know them and I care about them and what they're going through in their lives and them as individuals. But I don't look at a collective group and go, I have to respect you because you say that you're oppressed, because that's not how respect is earned. Respect is not earned through victimhood. Respect is earned through the quality of somebody's character. And you go, I want to respect that person. When I was growing up, it's funny because when I was growing up, I remember, like it was inconceivable for a child to look at an adult and call them by their first name. No, you call them Mr., Sir, Ma'am, Mrs., Miss, all of that stuff. It was like unheard of for you to call a child by an adult by their first name and things like that, because it was about respect and treating people that had come before you with respect and treating adults like with that kind of respect. And nowadays it's actually like almost the opposite. It's like people are like, what? Why do I have to call you Mr. or Mrs.? But then you have somebody over here screaming about like, you're not using my correct pronouns and getting upset. And then those, people almost punishing people for doing the same thing, but not looking back on even where some of those concepts would have come from. Like, it's one of those things that it was the parents that taught those kids that. And it wasn't, a bunch of adults screaming at me, don't call me by my first name. It was just a respect thing that I was taught by my parents, and it was how society worked. And there's so much of this, take what has come before, mold it into what you need for now, and ignore where it came from. Like Star Trek. I use Star Trek a lot when I talk to people about that, because there's a reason that a lot of the new shows that we see with Star Trek are all prequels. It's because they don't know how to innovate and build on what the next generation did. They don't know how to take what Voyager was doing, or what Deep Space Nine was doing, and expound on those ideas. So you go back to the original series, you say how problematic and awful it was, and then you make it look like the world you want it to look like, while ignoring the fact that there was a lot of merit to the fact that the original series was trailblazing something completely new for television and for entertainment. And like you said, teaching people lessons and stories about things that weren't even a concept in people's heads. Like, to say we run into this alien species and the first thing we don't do is shoot them with a laser gun, because that was what Buck Rogers was doing. You find an alien, you shoot the alien, and you punch them, and then you win. Like, sometimes Kirk fought aliens, but most of the time it wasn't about that. It wasn't about violence. It was about, how can we solve this with different ideas or concepts, or how can we come together or form alliances or learn something new about something. And those kind of concepts are why we have the society we do today. And now we have a group of people that think that that's all stupid and all problematic and all wrong, and then want to stand on the shoulders of that product and make their own world the way that they want it to. And it falls completely flat, because here's the thing, the worst you could do is write a Star Trek story and the theme of it is racism. But we went to a planet and the dark people and the light skinned people don't like each other, and you're like, okay, like, how about go to a planet and everybody looks the same but they all hate each other because one of them likes the color blue and one of them likes the color red. Like, and you're like, that's crazy, how do you deal with that, or whatever. Or
Right.
yeah.
Or, I mean, Star Trek, especially in later iterations, I mean, you had the Klingons, and the Klingons
Yes.
were, that, but then later you had Worf come in, and then in Voyager, I watched a lot of Voyager when I was a
Oh yeah.
teenager, but you had the gal who was half Klingon, and,
Yeah.
the way that she moved in the crew, and also in Voyager, how you had half the crew who were originally prisoners. And even that was
Yeah.
well, you're flung out into space and you got to run the ship with whoever you got. So I guess everyone in the holds are now crew members. Okay,
Yeah.
how does that work with your group dynamics? That's
Yeah. how
difficult. You
how
got
do
to
we
work through
relate
those
to
issues.
100%?
Yep.
Yeah. Totally something so fundamentally beautiful about that idea. How do I work with somebody that I looked at 5 minutes ago as my enemy, but how do we solve this really big problem? Because guess what? If we had all treated what happened in 2020, this vague thing that happened that nobody can talk about apparently on any form of social media without getting in trouble, if we had all banded together and said, what is the best course of action that we can all use to get the best outcome for everybody, and not, well, this side said this, so I don't agree with them, and this side said that, so I don't agree with them, and now we're all fighting over what, on top of the fact that there was an election coming, and so everybody's gunning for whatever is going to make the other side look the worst. And it's like, come on, guys, like, if you actually care about people, let's have a conversation about people. Because we've all learned, we all grew up watching Mr. Rogers and Reading Rainbow and all of these shows that were teaching us that it's more important to care about people than it is to care about your own gain and your own, what you can get out of a situation. But a lot of that's been forgotten because it, like you said earlier, everything's been deemed problematic. And so everything's problematic. You can't borrow anything from that. And so you have a bunch of people running around with no real lessons and no real idea of what they want or how to teach anybody anything. They just scream about anything that bothers them, or write stories or movies around things that bother them, Yep.
Or no, sorry, just to kind of hop in with the problematic thing, or
Yeah.
like nobody's allowed to just be wrong. Like even the villains are like, oh, well, they were okay in the end. It's like you could have two characters fighting
Yeah.
and you can have the audience decide which one of them is right. Maybe they're both kind of wrong. Maybe they had valid points, but they can't just be like, well, here was our scenario and the characters did what they thought was best. But then
Yeah.
the audience can be like, I think it could have been this way. I think maybe the solution would have been different.
Yeah.
Or I would say, gosh, the killer of the female superhero movie. The problem is, okay, Captain Marvel is insufferable, but even the first Wonder Woman movie, they are not allowed to be wrong. Wonder Woman was wrong. Chris Pine was right.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of your story, with your, stupid knockoff Howling Commandos. You couldn't
Yeah.
have had Wonder Woman going like, "Hey, I was wrong about all of this. The world is not the way I thought." They just
Yeah.
gave her this terrible action and moved on.
Yeah.
That, Thor is wrong. Iron Man was very wrong in his first movie. And
Yeah.
if you have all your male superheroes and they're like, "Hey, I had these issues." Winter Soldier, which is one of my favorite films,
Oh
you
yeah.
have, Captain America confronted with the fact of maybe I've been working for the bad guys.
Yeah.
And if you don't, Captain Marvel, who is this awful megalomaniac, and she's like, "I'm right, and I'm just going to go in blasting." Like, that is such a
Yeah.
terrifying character in your universe. But the universe right now won't even let itself confront that issue.
Yeah.
It just like there haven't been any real political issues in their quote political superhero movies. No real, I mean, since Winter Soldier, has there been a real villain besides Thanos, the evil economist?
Yeah.
Like that there's no, we're not talking about terrorism in any meaningful way. We're not talking about any
Yeah.
global takeovers, really. We're not, there's no teeth in any of this. The girl is always right, and we're going to make some jokes and end up smiling. And you can't confront evil or,
Yeah.
again, having some of your characters going the wrong way in a story
Yeah.
of maybe thinking it was good would be make for compelling media, and they just won't do it.
No, and that's the thing, because if you do that, you're making women look bad, and we forget that. Like, see, I grew up. Oh my gosh, I don't have the list in front of me now, but like, so one of my favorite shows, me and my mom used to watch back to back, Hercules: The Legendary Journeys and Xena: Warrior Princess, and it wasn't because Xena was hot, which that was part of it, but Xena was awesome. But Xena made mistakes. Xena did wrong things. Sometimes Xena couldn't figure things out. She didn't always win every fight that she ran into. I mean, we grew up with subtlety and empowered females that did things, and even in the comic books, which I didn't read a ton of as a kid when I was growing up, but I did read some and stuff. Yeah, like sometimes heroes failed and they messed up and they made mistakes, and that was hard. Or even and I know this is not a popular opinion for some people, because people are like, "Oh, Superman's boring because he's like invincible." I'm like, yeah, the issue with Superman wasn't that; it was like him dealing with the fact that like maybe the grocery store doesn't have eggs that day, and that's like a really rough time for him. But like he could like fly to another planet and just destroy it if he wanted. But like that doesn't solve any problems. Like, I don't know. There's definitely like an lost art form to, yeah, subtle characters, especially female characters, being able to make mistakes and be wrong just like any male character could be, and that development of that character. Because so I really like the first Wonder Woman, but I like the first Wonder Woman because before she really starts getting into the action sequences, there's a very big emphasis on her trying to learn that like people like deserve to be loved and treated with like honor and respect. Like the scene where she tries like the ice cream for the first time, and she's like, "Oh my god, you should be so proud of yourself," because we take that for granted that somebody did a good job of making ice cream. But yeah, I bought the ice cream from the ice cream vendor and I moved on with my life. Thanks for the ice cream. Not, "Oh wow, you did a great job. This should be awesome," because that might make somebody's day feel good or whatever. Or there's a sequence with the soldier that had PTSD or whatever, and he's like, "I don't want to do this anymore," and she's like, "Oh, but like who will sing for us?" Like this subtle like nugget of like, for a moment she saw, like, she reminded this guy like that he's more valuable than his ability to blow a guy's head off with a gun. That's
Right.
beautiful. But like you said, and as a whole, they don't allow women to be wrong, because if you make mistakes or you're wrong, that could send the wrong message. But then you have shows. It's funny because me and my wife have actually been rewatching Game of Thrones, and I remember how controversial sometimes that show could be, because they said that women weren't betrayed very well. But there's a lot of female characters in that show, and they're subtle. They do make mistakes. They don't always make the right course of action. Sometimes they're driven by emotional desire to see something happen a certain way, and then it doesn't happen that way, because that's not how the world works, and they have to be reminded of that. And even, it's funny because like I remember there's a lot of complaints about like the nudity in there and stuff, and yeah, sometimes the nudity is very gratuitous, but like when a guy is treating a woman like she's only important for her body, the show reinforces that that's not a good thing.
Right.
but it doesn't need to
I'll
stop and go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, sure. And I'll admit that I skipped Game of Thrones
I
because of
understand.
some of that. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, but having that there's a difference in shows between, that okay, horrible things are happening, but that's just how it is. And like, hey, there's consequences to these actions
Yeah.
that these people are doing something and it's gonna come and bite them later. That this
Yes.
is not just,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. This is
I-
not just a bad thing for bad thing's sake. It's like, yeah, sometimes bad people do bad things and they do not immediately get their comeuppance. Sometimes, because that's how life works. Sometimes bad people do horrible things and they get away with it for most of their lives. But, ultimately in history, good people do win out more often than not. But that's the thing, too, that we see a lot in history now is like people go back and they almost scour every possible story, every possible opportunity to look at a hero and go, where did they go wrong so that I can tear them down? You look at somebody like Mr. Rogers and like, it's funny because I remember somebody the other day, I saw this where they did a documentary and somebody was trying to say, well, Mr. Rogers was a Christian, so obviously he hated gay people. He was a homophobe and stuff. And then they did the documentary and the guy that played the postman on that show, who's a black guy, was gay. And there was a whole episode where he talked about where Mr. Rogers had his feet dipped in the pool because it was like a hot day. And I remember that episode when I was growing up, and he had the postman put his feet in the pool. It was actually a political statement from Fred Rogers saying, hey, you won't let your black people in your pool, but I will in my pool. But like, how, but once again, if all you can look at is somehow this guy must have been a bad person because his ideologies don't line up with mine, you'll miss how much work they were doing behind the scenes to help people and change a perception of somebody or change a perception of a people group, and stuff like that. And like, there's a story, it made me tear up in the documentary where the guy talks about the fact that like Fred basically told him he was proud of him one day, and he's like, I grew up my whole life without my father ever telling me I was proud of me. And it was like Fred in that moment was like my dad telling me, hey, I'm proud of you for what you did. There, but that's the beauty of people, and that's why they're heroes, is not because they were flawless people that never made any mistakes. I'm sure Fred Rogers made many mistakes in his life, but that wasn't the point. The point was his goal was to better people and let you know that you're loved, you're encouraged, that you're valuable, that you mean something to people. We look, and then we go back farther in history, and you're talking about the lady, well, I cannot remember her name now. You were just talking about the lady that sewed the flag,
Betsy
Betsy,
Ross.
Betsy Ross or whatever. Like, she just wanted to do right for her country. Like, who can fault her for that? It doesn't matter. Like, even if she wasn't an abolitionist, even if she was like, whatever, yeah, I own whatever. Like, you can't
Right.
look at somebody and go, hey, you were passionate about your country, cared about the people around you in the face of a heinous, horrible war, because war sucks and people die and that's really sad. She was like, I'm just going to do what I can to help the people around me. Like, that's a beautiful statement. Now, like you said, add on to the fact that she was like, no, I'm not cool with all of this or whatever. And then
No,
it's like,
she not only
go ahead.
that, but she was a Quaker, and she was a part of group of Quakers that actually broke off from the main Quaker church
Mm,
for helping the war effort at all. They're like, well, as pacifists, we can't, it's like, well, if people want to buy from us, we have to let anyone from either side buy from us. So if
yeah,
we supply Brits or we supply Americans, we just have to let that be. And Betsy took issue with that.
yeah,
So she was part of the very pro-American side in all of this. And yeah, she got flack. She, even if she had just been a woman who made a flag on commission, she probably would have taken flack for that too.
yeah,
But that no,
yeah.
she was all in, and she and her family were making flags well into the Civil War, actually,
That's
like as a
awesome.
generational thing.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. And instead of dismissing her and trying to figure out what was wrong with her, appreciate the part of what she did and appreciate the contributions that she did make to this world and to this country. That's the part of it that I think people really overlook a lot, is like, Not everybody in history was perfect, and well, nobody in history is perfect. History is full of people that made all kinds of mistakes and didn't do things right. But it's like somebody will go back and like somebody could be literally their whole life and their whole legacy is they rescued orphans from burning buildings, and they found out one time in a bar he made a pass at a woman, and they're like, he obviously was a misogynist, we can't have anything to do with this guy. It doesn't matter how many orphans he rescued, he was a misogynist. That's what we have to label him as. And like we said at the beginning of this, like, how awful is it to judge a person's entire existence by one or two mistakes, or give a person a sentence in their life of what they are and never give them an opportunity to change that perception or become something better than that. Because, you know, like Martin or Malcolm X was a criminal when he was younger and then turned his life around and was like, hey, you know, even though he wasn't a Christian, he was a Muslim, he was like devout to his religion. And like, it's funny because a lot of people don't know this because we don't learn this in our history books, but like the FBI were following Malcolm X and Martin Luther King all the time, constant surveillance all the time. And the FBI agent, when he was sent to give his report on Malcolm X, said he was a man of irreputable character. They said he was barely late for a meeting, let alone anything else of any kind of bad nature, even though he was a criminal in his past. You know, so like, but imagine if all we did was go like, well, he went to jail once. You know, you destroy a person's entire legacy by one mistake or one thing that they did, and ignore all the beauty of their life that they were trying to build for everybody else around them. And that part of it is just it's heartbreaking. But you know, I think that's sometimes what people don't understand about like people on our, I guess, our side of the aisle is our goal is not to like stir the boat or rock the boat or just be edgy for edge's sake. We're trying to point out, like, guess what? Just because somebody you don't like or necessarily agree with that person doesn't mean that person doesn't have anything of value to offer. They're amazing authors that have wrote great stories that you probably wouldn't agree with some of their lifestyle. Okay, but who cares? Like, move on. Like, are the stories great? Because if the stories are great and they mean something to you, then take that part of it and walk away with it, you know? It's like, I know people that are really torn about like what happened with J.K. Rowling because they don't agree with her stance on people. And I'm like, you cannot agree with her. But like, did her books mean something to you? Because are her books full of, you know, like, I'm not saying that somebody should agree or disagree with her, but are her books full of her calling out trans people? Are her books full of identity politics and arguing and screaming about feminism or you know, any of that? No, they're just stories. They're stories about people that made mistakes. They're stories about people that we think were villains that were actually heroes, or people that, you know, came from terrible, horrible circumstances and rose above that to inspire people around them and stuff. That's the beauty of storytelling. That's why it's important. And I think that that's become a lost art form for a lot of people, is being able to write a character that is flawed and made mistakes and rose above that to become something better than themselves. It's like you said, nowadays, everybody has to be perfect and nobody cares. Nobody wants to watch a story about a lady that decides to like, I don't know, I'm going to become a Jedi one day and nothing will stop me from becoming a Jedi. And she never faces any real difficulties, no matter what choices she makes. Because she made some like Rey makes some really bad choices. Like, Rey's not a good person in the book, in the movies. Like, and I don't mean that to tear her down for being a woman, but you know, Luke Skywalker, the Jedi of Jedis, was like, holy cow, you really like the dark side, and that's not good. She uses like force lightning in the third movie, stabs
Yeah,
Kylo
she
Ren.
tortures a guy with force lightning. Is like, well,
Yeah.
I guess that's okay, and the guy's gonna die for you, and you're like, what?
Yeah, you're like, what? And then she gets into a moment where she loses a fight with Kylo Ren, and then he goes, oh my gosh, my mom just died, I'm really upset. And she goes, cool, well, now I can stab you. Like, what a great opportunity to stab you in the stomach. That's not a
Right.
Jedi thing. That's
I know.
awful.
I know.
Like,
And then you have these entire series of stupid movies. Like, okay, so Kylo Ren spends, 2 3/4 movie going, oh, Rey, call me back. I'm like, okay, whatever, Kylo.
yeah.
Go do your evil guy thing. It's like, and then at the very end, it's like, actually, I'm a good guy now. I'm like, well, this is fascinating. Look, he's a good guy now. And then they're like, and no, he's gone.
No, he's
Like,
gone. Yep. None of it means anything. And
That
you
that
know,
could have meant something. I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
that was
Well, at
the
least
most
you got to
interesting thing that has happened since this movie series
yeah.
started. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, at least he got to kiss Ray at the end, right? That's what
Yeah.
really mattered. That's what
Yeah.
we were all waiting for, is really that kiss at the end.
Exactly.
We were like, wow, riveting stuff. They've spent the entire
Yeah.
series hating each other and trying to
Yeah.
murder each other, and they've had like one good conversation, and
Yeah.
then they just
And
dies.
then the force power thing that never happened before, but we introed earlier in this movie, that
Yeah,
just happens. Their relationship makes so much sense, and I'm
yeah,
really happy that I spent all this time watching this
yeah. I'm
great.
like, thank you for this. This is wonderful stuff. Yeah,
This
I mean,
is
like,
cinema.
yeah, like I said, I could sit and watch Jane Austen in Pride and Prejudice, and I was hooked. I was like, these two got to get together. Like, she's got to be with Darcy, but like, he's also a terrible person, but he's not
Yeah.
really. He's actually a really good guy. Like, the twists and turns of that are amazing. I'm like, where is that today? Nowadays, it's just like the lady screams at people, and then the guy's a jerk, and then she like, well, I don't even need a man in the end. I'm like, great. Well, I'm glad you don't need a man. I really wanted to see the end of this. You go, I'm alone and eating cat food in my like apartment by myself. Great. That's how romantic. It's
Perfect.
so yeah, perfect. What a perfect ending to the story. No, I get that's where I get fired up, is watching something like that. It's such a lost art form to be able to appreciate like complex storytelling. Sometimes complex storytelling just looks like a mess that you can somehow bring together in the end, and it makes this beautiful picture. So yeah.
And sometimes somebody tried to make complex storytelling. It's just a mess. This is none of these things. What is this? Why?
Yeah. Yep.
They're
100%.
like, isn't this a clever plot twist? No, no,
Yeah.
really, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know. It's just it's a weird landscape that we're living in today, and it sucks. But like I said, I think there has definitely been a turnaround, but a lot of that turnaround has to come through the strength of the community, not through the strength of an individual. Like what Eric July is doing as an individual is important, but it's the strength of the community behind him that's supporting him and wanting to see him do more and wanting to see him succeed at more. That's what matters. That's the power behind it, not him just going, I'm just going to do this thing. Because if he doesn't have his community to support him, then that thing doesn't work like we want. And just like with you guys, what you guys are doing, you say like, hey, instead of watching this knitting community fracture and going, well, I'm just not going to knit anymore, you go like, no, I'll just find people that I agree with, that are willing to talk to me and be my friend, regardless of whether we always agree on everything or not. And we'll build a community that supports people and helps people in whatever way that we can, because all of that matters. Like from every corner of every place, if you have a community of people that work together and want to see the people around them succeed, then you'll get a lot farther than a lot of these companies that are built on the back of one guy did all this work, and now we're just going to take that work and try to do whatever we want with that work, regardless of what the vision was or the hope was at some point, things like that. So yeah, I that's why I think it's really cool. I mean, I'm not a knitter. I probably will never start knitting, but I can appreciate it because it takes a lot of work and time and effort and dedication, and I couldn't do that. Like, and I love that though, because now I get to meet people, make friends with people that do something that I can appreciate the art of, that isn't in my wheelhouse. It helps me learn something new about the world around me, and it gives me a different perspective on things. Yeah.
Definitely. And you don't knit, we don't make movies. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also with that entire speech, what an awesome time to have an independent movie studio
Yeah.
when so much of the writing and mainstream stuff is so totally out of the ballpark.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
I
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, but during the whole Star Trek, Star Wars conversation, I was pretty quiet because that's not my wheelhouse. I think I know who Ray is and Kylo Ren, but I'm not
That's
certain.
okay. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Stop, Fleshy.
hearing you talk about it though is really exciting, because the things that you see that are wrong with it makes me really interested to see what you're going to do and what you think the right way to go about it is, you know, like having flawed characters. I mean, I don't even watch movies anymore, honestly, because why? Why?
Yeah.
You've got to have in the end, it's gonna be the woman's right, the minority character is right, and probably the white guy is a bad guy, and everything has just turned into this very formulaic like nonsense. And it's exciting to hear you talk about like what you think about all of this and where you want to go with it, because it's not what everybody is doing, and it's going to be awesome. Like
I appreciate that. Yeah,
it's gonna be.
You may
So-
even
Trying.
say epic.
Epic. Yes, good, Anne.
Well, thank you.
It's right there in front of me. I didn't even think of it.
That's funny. No, you're
But
good.
so when stuff is going to start coming out? So that's on what, EpicVerse.tv? Is that where people are going to find the stuff?
Yeah, so this website currently is the early version of the website. We're working on a new version that will be ready, and we'll kind of announce all of that when we're ready for launch. We don't have a specific time yet for launch. I will say it probably won't be this year, but it may be early next year. I won't give any definitive dates because when we're ready, we're ready, you know, but we want to make sure that everything's done and that we have something to present everybody. And like I said, the biggest thing is, and I'm not asking for the grace for this. I want people to criticize, and I want people to give their honest opinions, because that's the beauty of this, is that people can tell us right away, I don't like this, or I like this, or I have mixed feelings about this. I want that, because that's how we grow as creatives. But like, yeah, the hope is, we say, hey, listen, this is what we did with our money and our resources to give you guys, to present to you guys, to tell you, hey, there's hope for a better tomorrow, and we would love to write better stories for you and give you entertainment again that you can watch and appreciate and share with your friends and talk about and geek out about again, because there's just not any of that anymore. And maybe one day we'll be able to have the resources to make something like Star Wars, or make something that has a legacy that you can share with your children, and they can watch it and they can appreciate it and they can love it and share it with their kids, things like that. I would love for there to be legacy stories that we write one day. I don't know. I can't see the future, but I know that I'm going to work really hard to write good stories. And me and Josiah are working really hard to write good stories that we can be proud of, that my kids can be proud of, and that, I can go back and watch and be like, yeah, I'm happy with that, even if it's never perfect, because no artist is ever happy with their work, unfortunately. It's the mark of an artist, is you'll look at it and you go, I probably could have done that better, but the thing is, I'm going to put it out there, and that's the risk. You put it out there, you hope people like it, and that's my hope, is that people will like it and enjoy it, and then we could keep making more stuff for people as we go on. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
So, Epic Mike, thank you so much for coming on today. It has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And before we go, guys, please remember to check out Chicken Lady Fiber Arts. Comment. You could win this. It's super fun. Look, it's an ornament kit. Like, who doesn't want that? Yep. And you can use the code Scorching20 PIK for 20% off at chickenladyfiberarts.com. So make sure you check her out, because she's awesome.
Yes. Go ahead, check out her website for beautiful yarns such as these, and join her newsletter. Again, chickenladyfiberarts.com, and the code is Scorching20 PIK, 20% off. Go check it out.
That's cool. So thank you guys for joining us. Mike, thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's very exciting.
Awesome.
And yes, you can get his links below. I'll make sure they're in the description.
I'm always doing something. I'm all over the internet, so you'll probably run into me at some point and doing something. Yeah.
Well, maybe once everything launches, we could talk to you again. That would be super cool. So
I would love that. That would be great.
Come hang out with the knitters, because that's, obviously why not. So
yeah.
A key point to every press tour. I know.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I do not take it lightly. Like I said, I want the knitting community behind us too. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you. All right. We'll see you guys next week.